Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the New York City Hospitality Group and our featured educational webinar. My name is Derek Sherman. I'm the director of the New York City Hospitality Group, and today we'll be discussing an eco-friendly approach to delivery with some very special guests. And before we jump into it, we just want to share what the New York City Hospitality is all about. As much as we can relate to, and I know we have some operators on the phone as well, in running a hospitality organization, there are many professionals that are vital and essential to make that organization successful. And the New York City Hospitality represents professionals across the industry in various areas of expertise to provide that support and education. This is a display on our website that you can find that categorizes our members, and you can see from concepts to development to expansion and what have you. So please check us out. We'd also, on behalf of our webinars, we will also donate, and in this particular webinar, we'll donate $300 to the Isaac Center. If you would like to learn more about their organization, we'll put their information in the chat. This organization also has a special meeting to our moderator, Scott Landers, who you'll hear from in a moment, in being a community resource here in New York City. So please check them out and the incredible work that they do. We're very grateful for all of their efforts. As mentioned, today's educational webinar will feature special guests and will be led by Scott Landers, who's the co-founder of Figure 8 and a member of the New York City Hospitality Group. It will discuss an eco-friendly approach to delivery. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Scott?
Excellent. Thanks, Derek. It's great to be here today and really excited to dive into our topic. As Derek mentioned, the Isaac Center does hold a special place for me. We're in the same neighborhood and both focus on food delivery. So that seems appropriate inspiration for starting off our conversation today. But to reiterate, my name is Scott Landers. I'm the co-founder and systems engineer at Figure 8 Logistics. We are a food delivery consulting firm based here in New York City, working with restaurants of all sizes to help them build their food delivery business. For today's topic, we really want to focus on closed loop delivery and how to make delivery more sustainable and really continue the conversation around the future of that. So for today, we've assembled a panel here with Sweeney from DeliverZero, Sandra Noonan from Just Salad, and Paige Woodward from Figure 8. So just to set a little bit of context, in New York every year, over 1 billion delivery containers are wasted. This is everything from ordering catering or delivery, getting a single-use bottle, going to get some cream cheese from your local deli. Packaging really comes up everywhere with food, and they've become almost synonymous in building systems that decouple the packaging from the food are really, I think, the spirit of what we're here today to talk about. So we'll start off with some introductions. Would love for everyone to share your name, company, and really how you got into sustainability in the first place. So Sandra, we'll start with you.
Hi, pleasure to be here. I'm Sandra. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer at the restaurant chain Just Salad, founded in 2006 in New York City. Our mission is to make everyday health and everyday sustainability possible. Just Salad founded a reusable bowl program back in 2006. We launched it at our very first store. The reusable bowl looks similar to what you see in my background. And the way it works is that every time you come into a restaurant, you get a free topping with every use of the reusable bowl. So we provide free food in exchange for customers opting out of single-use packaging. And I'm happy to discuss that more in this conversation today.
Excellent. I think a lot of history to bring there. How long, just as a quick question, how long has that reusable program been in place?
Since 2006 when we were founded, so it's been 15 years.
Excellent. And on the newer side of New York City delivery technology, Lauren, I'd love to hear a little bit about your work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I co-founded DeliverZero in November 2019. We started with 8 restaurants in Park Slope just to see if other people felt the same pain point we did as consumers. I have 2 co-founders. Prior to that, I'd been in startups and had personally practiced, low waste living, like cloth diapered my daughter, don't use paper towels, all of this stuff, but hadn't brought it into my life as a startup person. So DeliverZero was exciting for me in that way. We expanded pretty quickly after launching, got some exciting press. The pandemic happened. We took a 3-month hiatus, and then we relaunched and started covering Manhattan around this time last year. So now we cover most of Brooklyn, all of Manhattan, and parts of Queens. So DeliverZero is a platform that works similar to Uber Eats, Seamless, whatever you might be used to using, but our orders come in reusable containers that are returnable throughout our network. There are 2 ways of returning them. You can hand them back to the courier who delivers your next order, or drop them off at any restaurant on our network. And I'm looking forward to answering more questions about how it works.
Excellent. And how many years has DeliverZero been around?
So we launched in November 2016, existed for 3 months, and then took this pause. So it's a little choppy, but we relaunched about a year ago. So we've had a solid year run now.
Great. So we have an operator, a technologist, and a consultant. So Paige, would love to hear your perspective as a food delivery consultant and what brought you into sustainability.
Sure. Like Scott mentioned, my name is Paige Woodward. I'm a technology strategist at Figure 8. My background is largely in restaurant operations. So kind of the familiar, work your way up the chain and in bars and restaurants story. I would say, from my experience, for the majority of my early career, excess food waste, packaging waste was the normal. The double wrapped containers and the extra napkins with every order. I think companies have always cared about managing food costs and supplies costs, but in my experience, nothing separated, or really intentionally processed, both pre or post consumer waste. So, and I was kind of just a part of that system, I think, for a long time. And then, where things changed for me was when I started working with food halls and public markets in New York. So I fell into more of like a facilities operator role, managing the maintenance and upkeep of the food halls. So building community-wide systems for waste management and paper and packaging sourcing. And I think there was a moment for me, after becoming aware of just how much waste one food hall in New York City with, 10 to 15 vendors generates in a year, that I realized, how much of a responsibility that the facility operator has to create an infrastructure really to, allow everyone to operate more intentionally. So that's when I started to, explore, technologies and programs like reusable dine-in packaging as a service to the vendors, on-site organic waste digesting, and other third-party programs, offering things like compost pickup and such. So I think, COVID, of course, threw a wrench in everything, and in particular, some really exciting sustainability initiatives that were happening in our industry. So that's why I'm really glad that, to see companies like DeliverZero and Just Salad, I guess, picking up the ball and continuing to run with it. So.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen is it really has kind of laid bare the diversity of pollutants, almost, if you're going to call it that, or of these materials that aren't properly managed, and really how systemic the solutions have to be. It does have to incorporate guest behavior, consumer psychology, the actual business model of the restaurants or the food markets, and then ultimately having the technologists provide the software and the physical containers to really enable all of this. So I think we have a good representation of the system here, and that's what we want to get into. So for this first section of our panel today, really want to talk about why reusables are the answer. And I think we've all heard the mantra, reduce, reuse, recycle. And a lot of times recycling is what gets the focus, compostable materials, recyclable materials, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We have reusable systems. And so I'd love to just dive into, why reusables are the answer, and in particular, how we make that work in the system. So Sandra, thinking of the reusable versus recyclable debate when it comes to the economics of the business, I know loyalty is a big part of the strategy here. You mentioned the free topping. I'd love for you to just share how you came to that decision, or how you continue to evaluate this question of really why reusables and all the work and effort it takes to pull off a system like that.
Sure. I think it helps to ground ourselves in some statistics, and the numbers speak for themselves and really underscore the gravity of the single-use waste situation. So a couple of numbers that actually started me on my own zero waste journey and led me to the role at Just Salad and being passionate about reuse include the following. So in 2015, Americans generated 78 million tons of packaging waste, and that equals 30% of our total municipal solid waste generation. So packaging includes food packaging, is an enormous fraction of our waste generation. Another statistic that's become very well known over the past couple of years is that only 9% of all plastic ever produced since plastic became a modern ubiquitous material, 9% of it has ever been recycled according to academic estimates. The rest is landfilled and incinerated or ends up as litter in the environment. And finally, the United States generates the largest amount of plastic waste of any country in the world. So I didn't sign up for that system. I always thought, years ago, that if I was recycling, it was going to take care of itself, and was blissfully unaware that that wasn't actually working the way I thought as a consumer it was, and that those chasing arrow signs on the bottom of one's packaging do not in fact mean that it's going to be repurposed in an infinite loop of recyclability. So to your question, yes, our reusable bowl system incentivizes customers to ditch single use by offering a free topping. Does that cost us money? Yes, but it is basically cost neutral at the end of the day, because keep in mind, we're saving money on single-use packaging. So the cost of the free topping, the free salad topping you get with every use, is offset by the savings we get from single use. Was that the reason we did it? No, our founder really did create this program out of a passion for preventing single-use waste. I will say, just to conclude this thought, that some of our customers are really motivated by the free topping. They're not eco warriors who have any particular passion for ending single-use waste. They're value motivated and they like that free topping. And that's okay with us, because at the end of the day, it's still having the impact we wanted to have of preventing single-use trash. So that's how the program works today. And I think over time, we will enhance it with a greater integration into our digital rewards and loyalty system as a restaurant chain.
Yeah, and thinking of that balance of, appealing to kind of the higher ideals as well as making it economically affordable, they seem to be in tension constantly. So thinking about, how to balance that, you mentioned integrating with technology. Lauren, I know this is something you've been working on, which is not only solving the economic challenge of how do you create a service that any restaurant can afford, but also how do you almost tap into existing consumer behavior and expectations around how they order food. So thinking of that journey of bridging the software and maybe existing customer behavior into, a restaurant hospitality system, how has DeliverZero gone about that, and where are you going from here?
So I think one of the biggest perceptions that we're challenging as a business is that sustainability has to cost more, and then particularly reuse. Reuse saves restaurants money, and if you just like step back and think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Like, you save money by not buying something over and over and over again, and using one thing over and over and over again instead. One of our advisors calls it a 3 to 5% tax that restaurants pay for single-use packaging, because the stuff costs money, sometimes more than consumers realize. It'll often cost 50 cents for a theoretically compostable bowl with a theoretically recyclable lid. And the restaurant's spending that money to give the perception that they're, sustainably minded. But at the end of the day, that is just trash, and it costs them, say, $2 if the person gets 4 bowls in their order. So that's really expensive. We are currently not charging the restaurants anything for our packaging. So we're actually saving them money on packaging, and we take a commission on every order. And we've intentionally kept the commission a bit lower than, say, the commission the same restaurant might pay on Seamless. We're exploring allowing customers the option to order outside of our platform. So whether it's through other platforms or in person at restaurants that we work with, in those cases, we would perhaps be charging a usage fee, but we would intentionally keep the usage fee lower than single-use packaging costs, partially because we want to create that incentive for restaurants. Often a restaurant operator has to make decisions based on dollars and cents. And then partially because our margins will be able to absorb that. Like, we're structured in such a way where we're going to be able to make money while charging less than single use.
So one question I have, and I guess this is maybe to both Laura and Sandra, is who washes these dishes?
That's a great question. In our system, the restaurants are washing them in the same dishwashers that they would use to wash, say, a fork that you eat off of at the same restaurant. And I've probably never thought about the fact that it's been in 1,000 other people's mouths until now. Maybe next time you go to a restaurant, you'll think about it. But we're not uncomfortable with that. We eat off of plates at restaurants every day. Totally fine. We put a single or a reusable container in the same dishwasher. It's sanitized. It's just a different way of participating in a reuse system than most of us are used to. We are getting into dishwashing just so that we can work with certain operators that just don't have the dishwashing capacity. Some fast casuals that every hand in the restaurant is busy preparing orders, getting them to customers. They have tiny dishwashing stations that don't get used quite as much.
Yeah, our system works in 2 ways depending on which system you opt in for. So our 15-year-old program, you buy the bowl for $1, you own it, you take it home, you wash it, bring it back, and we fill it with a contactless system that is designed to be safe or safer than a single-use container. The other program that we're piloting is one where you essentially check out the bowl, bring it back, we wash it, and it goes in a loop. And that's been piloting at 2 stores. So we have those 2 programs available. But to Lauren's point about being comfortable eating off from plates at a sit-down restaurant, one of the best analogies I ever heard with reuse was from Tom Zaki, the founder of Loop, a reuse platform. He said, listen, you go to the dentist and you know that those implements have been used on thousands of patients before you. And the reason you're comfortable with that is because there's a system that you trust and it works. And restaurants are so tightly controlled by health codes and have to follow these stringent protocols, that it's a very similar situation. It's a system that that has very, very strict rules on sanitation. So I completely agree with what Lauren's the point she's making there.
So thinking about the reusable system, having dishwashing, there's a different set of kind of operational challenges. Thinking back though, before we get there, Paige, you've spent a lot of time sourcing single-use packaging, of various materials, oftentimes recyclable or compostable. What we're seeing with supply chains are, that single use of any kind, whether it's sustainable material or an unsustainable material, you're still having to buy stock and continue to move those products across what is a pretty long supply chain, which we've seen can be disrupted. We've seen that over the last year. So from a more just a packaging perspective, looking at all the options, compostable, reusable, recyclable, what are you seeing as far as how restaurants can start to source these materials, or even think about beginning to transition their packaging program? Because it's not always a switch overnight.
Right. And I think it's tough for restaurants exploring delivery, for the first time, just delivery full stop. Identifying the right packaging is a very daunting task, right? So everybody wants packaging that preserves the integrity of their product, that's affordable, and the cherry on top would be reflects the style of their brand, right? And restaurants who have historically operated strong takeout and delivery programs have had years to kind of perfect the recipe, right? Through trial and error. But for restaurants getting started, many don't really know where to turn. It's overwhelming because packaging, especially branded packaging, is so costly. Long lead times. If you don't have the volume, it's really tough to catch a break. So, where does this fit into the conversation, of restaurants, when they're building out delivery? I think operators that are concerned about how enabling delivery could change the perception of their brand, identifying the right packaging is critical to that initial delivery system build. However, I'll say that getting to where you want to go takes time, and it's a journey. So, thinking about implementation as this phased approach, right? Maybe zero waste is your long-term goal. So I think, starting from the very beginning, I think it's smart to not, I have to make the right decisions right now before launch because I have to order 100,000 units of this item. So I'm making a decision for the next 2 years, right? So I say, start small, right? Ease into the more costly branded items with alternatives like stamping or stickers or whatnot, until you find what's right and then make the investment. I think if a restaurant is considering closed loop delivery for the future, even more of a reason to start lightweight and focus now on building a tech stack that could eventually support a closed loop operation.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up, is this tension between branding, which means customized oftentimes, versus reusable, which is often more universal. And in the case of something like DeliverZero, the same containers are getting reused across multiple brands. So, Lauren, have you heard any pushback from restaurants on wanting their label on their bowl, or is this something that is starting to change in the operator's mindset?
Sure, we've heard it. I think it feels, I don't know how to put it other than a little passé. I think consumers are going to start to understand that, a reusable system that lives across, and obviously I have very skewed perspective here, but one reusable system that lives across all restaurants is the best way to go, because they don't just want one reusable from one restaurant. They want to order from the Thai place, the salad place, the sushi place, and cover all of their different needs under the same system, and have a container that's returnable throughout that network. So I think they'll appreciate the environmental value of that convenience, or the convenience and the environmental value of one single system over a heavily branded system that only covers part of their needs. As far as branding reusable containers, we're talking with this company in Germany about a washable ink that could actually solve that pain point. I am so hardcore in the one network for everyone, and there are other ways to incorporate your brand, but obviously that's where I'm bringing tension into the conversation, because an operator is going to have a very different perspective. So this washable ink could be a solution that kind of helps us find a middle ground, and allows us to, brand things specifically for different festivals, for different food halls, for different operators. But then disposables that are heavily branded, obviously not something that I'm going to support at all.
In Sandra, I mean, when Just Salad got started, I imagine there weren't many, if any, other reusable programs. So that history in mind has led to a pretty unique shape of the bowl, and you have a unique setup going on there. As you look, to expand or seeing new services come online, what advice do you have for operators who are just getting started in their reusable journey now?
Couple things. You're correct. In 2006, reusables in the food service industry were not really a thing. So we were a first mover. I will add that we use DeliverZero at one of our restaurants. And so we see it as the sustainable version of another third-party delivery platform. We're on most of them. So we see no conflict with having our own system and also letting customers order from DeliverZero if that's what they choose. I think it's great. But my advice for other operators is think holistically. And so it's not just, so reusables are about reducing single use. Reducing single use means reducing single-use waste before it can even happen. And so before even thinking about, or while you're thinking about reusable containers, think also about giving out forks to delivery customers who are ordering food into their homes where they have metal utensils. Why are we doing that? As a industry, we need to do better. Why are we putting plastic out in the world that customers are literally turning around and throwing in the trash? I have a real problem with that. And I think that as an industry, we need to turn off that default and band together to make that a thing of the past. And so when an Uber Eats allows the customer to opt out of plastic forks, and actually they do that by default, and I still get those plastic forks into my home, I don't think that's acceptable. We need to train our people to heed those customer instructions, and we're not doing that well enough. So my point is, start at the basics, like not offering plastic if the customer didn't want it. But then when it comes to reusables, I think a multi-pronged approach. Join DeliverZero. Test out Just Salad's bowl program and see if you can integrate the same kind of thing into your standard operating procedures. It's easier than it seems. It's not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to put reusables into your business. The health codes accommodate it, and it's just a matter of training and operations at the end of the day.
I want to circle back on one point that Sandra made and that I made. I think that obviously I'm a big fan of the network approach and having one network that covers all types of food that someone might order for any meal of the day. That said, I think that there is value in certain restaurant operators like Just Salad having their own system, because ordering something like a salad is very habitual. Something like a salad, a juice can work very well in a closed loop, in a single operator closed loop. So I think these systems can stand alongside each other, especially when something like a salad is part of someone's daily routine. I would also love to see like a juice press or something similar do a reusable program, because it's the kind of thing people will go 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the solution to reusables is almost to use them more, right? Is to find those opportunities where, I brush my teeth every day, I eat breakfast every day, I have tea every day, right? Those are the opportunities where you can start to not only build frequency, but build that habit. And conversely, they're also where you're using probably the most, single-use containers if you're still on that system. So pausing from where we are today, right? So thinking about operators getting started, what is like the one big thing they can be doing, right? Whether is it training the team? Is it putting up signage to continue to educate their guests? I'd love to just have a quick, round table. And maybe Paige, we'll start with you.
I don't know if I have a one thing, but I'll say I think, to start focusing on the on-site logistics behind closed loop to start, right? Great example of that would be through a partnership with a company like DeliverZero, for example, who can handle the off-site logistics, the customer communication, because, they have the tech or they have, the manpower to support that. So start there, perfect that on-site closed loop process. Like, how are you washing your containers? Like, how do you receive them and manage that stock, right? Then eventually, I think, and this kind of goes back to, what Lauren mentioned before, is like, owning that your native online ordering experience is really the next step, starting with your online ordering platform, identifying a system that will allow you as a brand to have this kind of bilateral communication with your customers and your fleet. And then either bringing delivery in-house or identifying a local logistics partner with the capability and the willingness to participate in that kind of program.
Yeah, Lauren, any other kind of one big recommendation that an operator can take away today?
Like, one is working with us, but that's a little too obvious. 2 is whatever systems you have in place, make sure your team is well trained on them, whether that's, working with DeliverZero and making sure that your team understands the orders that come in, say, in this way, whether it's through the DeliverZero platform or through our newer integrations, need to be in reusable containers. But then to circle back on Sandra's point, make sure people are only getting utensils if they want them. There's a skip the stuff bill that is, will hopefully have a hearing in September or October, but it would make utensils opt-in only, which just makes so much sense, because operators are just hemorrhaging money on this stuff that then it piles up in a customer's drawer in their kitchen. Like, I have a drawer of this stuff because I've gotten it many times when I haven't wanted it. And this is something that even as DeliverZero, we have to work really closely with restaurants on this. There's not an immediate link. We say, the customer wanted it in a reusable container. Do you think that they wanted this plastic spoon? But it's an ongoing process. And I think the more the system changes and the more it becomes ubiquitous to only include stuff if the customer specifically requests it, the better.
Yeah, and Sandra, any other? I know you've given so many good insights. Any other angles that we haven't talked about, or something more obscure that you're like, oh yeah, that first time we had to go through this was, a real key part of getting the system set up?
Yeah, I think make it part of your company's DNA. And that's hard, but what I mean by that is you can't implement a reusable system top down. Your employees need to be bought in to a certain extent. It's aside from the SOP, which employees are trained to follow to the letter, they still need to understand why you're doing this, so that, as Lauren said, they're not enclosing a plastic fork along with the reusable container. Makes no sense. The customer's not going to want that unless it's a certain, specific situation where they're eating on a park bench or something. But I will be completely transparent. We have to continue training after 15 years, partly because there's turnover in any industry, so we have new employees coming in all the time, but it is so part of our company's DNA, and I still have to be the champion and voice of the program to make sure it's executed at the highest level. And luckily, we have the resources at Just Salad to do that. So make it part of your company's DNA, ingrain it into training and the culture. And then just taking a step back, you as the operator, try to make sure that you understand the problem yourself. Why are your compostable containers not doing the job? Because compostable containers rarely get composted. Make sure you're bought into it and you understand why your current status quo isn't the most sustainable option. I think you have to be really bought into the business case yourself and the sustainability case yourself, if that makes sense.
And I think to your point, you didn't buy into this system, right? This isn't the system that you woke up one day and said, like, yeah, I want to send a lot of plastic forks out into the world, but that's the world that we inherited and one that came into. And to your point, it is a matter of taking those steps to start to move forward. It sounds like having the right partners, right? Having great people training, and then being willing to understand more of the societal impact and be willing to internalize that. And I think it's okay to give yourself permission and your customer permission to change and realize that sometimes change is better. And even though it's can feel difficult in the middle, we know where we're going. So with that in mind, I think the last session here before we opened up the Q&A, I'd love to chat about the future of reusables. And we focus a lot on the bowl. That's probably the main piece of equipment that we need to make reusable as what's holding the food. But there are the utensils, there are cups, there are bags, there's the shrink wrap that you use to cover your prep at the end of the day. There are all these different things that are single use in a restaurant that aren't just the bowls that we put the food in. So thinking about the future, looking out, 20 years, right? What excites you? What are you most curious to see? What's the one item you want to see made reusable? Lauren, I'd love let's start with you.
Yeah, I think in my mind, the future includes more ubiquitous systems. Like Loop came up during this call today, like Loop becoming more ubiquitous, our system becoming more ubiquitous, so that it's convenient for both customers and operators to, say, return things. So one of the biggest challenges right now with reusable systems is the reverse logistics and ensuring that returns are convenient. So the bigger the network, the more convenient returns are. So just growing the size of these networks would be really game changing. You mentioned bags. I am excited to see a better solution for reusable bags. The reason we haven't tackled this problem ourselves yet is there's a different system for washing a bag than washing a container. You can put the container in a dishwasher, but to sanitize a bag, you need a laundry facility, which we don't have yet, and redistributing those. So it could be us that eventually tackles that problem. It could be, something out of the Beyond the Bag challenge that Closed Loop Partners runs could be, the solution that ends up taking over. But I think that there need to be big, trustworthy systems that people understand kind of inherently. Like we're working on a new logo so that someone will see a logo and just kind of instantly process this. This means this operator is reusable provider. I can return things here. I can get things in reusable containers here without having to think too hard about it. The more customers have to think, the worse. So big, easy to understand systems are what I'm looking forward to. And then plastic wrap, that's terrifying. I don't know what we do about that. I mean, I don't use it at home, but like at home, it's easy enough to use the bees wrap stuff, but restaurant operators, that one is for you.
Well, you mentioned plastic wrap and closed loop partners. So Sandra, when you think of the future, what excites you, or what are you working to bring to food and hospitality?
So we're working on integrating reuse into our upcoming loyalty system revamp, and that will come to fruition in 2022. So reusing at Just Salad, or using the reusable bowl at Just Salad will be like a loyalty accelerator. You will be treated even more like a VIP. So that's exciting to me. I think on a macro level, I'm cautiously excited about the mega chains like Burger King, McDonald's, Starbucks, all piloting reuse systems. So McDonald's in the UK, there was an article this week that they finally launched a reusable cup use and return system. Starbucks did that in the Pacific Northwest recently. And Burger King is piloting a reusable like Big Mac container with Loop in the fall. And I think I find that exciting because they are culture, they can move the culture at their scale. And I am excited to see how that's received, but also just already by the message that it has sent. The big operators, the mega chains are realizing that single use is truly, truly unsustainable. And any success they have in reuse is a tailwind to smaller operators like Just Salad and to startups like DeliverZero, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is exciting. I think having the consistency of knowing I can walk into a coffee shop with my reusables. It's not like every day it's a gamble here. I have my few that I know will accept them.
Yeah.
Some that like depends on who's working, and then others that they're just
Totally.
So yeah, because you're right. It's PR for reusables at that scale. I mean, that's a global audience that they're talking to.
Yeah, the problem is that they have to move more slowly. We've talked to some of them, and their scale makes them slower to move and completely roll these things out. So we, the littler operators, have to move nimbly, and they're moving at their slower pace, and they have to help change the cultural direction. So I think it definitely requires this entire ecosystem of smaller and bigger players.
Yeah. And Paige, when you look out to the future, working across a range of restaurants, what are you looking for? What are you hearing from operators that they're hoping happens in the future?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, I'm thinking about the little guys a lot of the times, when we have these conversations, and how can we make these systems accessible? And I guess this goes back to Lauren's point. I think it's going to require collaboration between restaurants and communities. I think to get closed loop off the ground, restaurants need to share resources, whether that's driver fleets or washing facilities. I think the widespread adoption of closed loop delivery will rely heavily on marketplaces, right? Like DeliverZero, that, like Lauren said, like offer this infrastructure that can support a collective, right? Because labor, will always cost money, and sales are never promised, right? So making closed loop logistics accessible to the masses, I think will require systems that can support a network of operators. And that could be, you know, online marketplaces, hospitality organizations, alliances, independent co-ops.
So creating a closed loop community.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, we do have a few questions that came in from our registrants, and if anyone else in the audience has a question, feel free to drop it in. But I'm going to take a few of these here. So we'll start with a simple one. So this one's for you, Lauren. Could you speak to how DeliverZero integrates with vendors' POS systems?
That's a really timely question. So from the beginning, we've just provided them with a tablet similar to the other platforms. When we launched, I'd hear from like VC friends about the aggregators, but when I was in restaurants, I wasn't seeing them as much. So it was kind of this thing that like was starting to bubble up, but I wasn't actually seeing it on the ground. But now it's becoming more of a thing. People want just one tablet in the restaurant rather than a tablet for Seamless, a tablet for DeliverZero. So we're working on integrating. And yeah, we're going to start integrating with the POSs, especially as some upcoming changes in the business that I can't really speak to too specifically publicly yet happen. We do, you know, send orders from our tablet to the printer and to the fax machines, all of that. But yeah, it's hard for me to answer that question without getting into details that I can't quite disclose yet.
More integration on the way, it sounds like, is the high level.
That's a high level takeaway.
High level takeaway for DeliverZero and for the theme of the reusable community is deeper integration. A little bit of a different question, and I guess maybe this is for Sandra and Paige. So in addition to the packaging side of the ecosystem, how do you think about food waste and how to integrate that into the conversation? Because, you know, while we are focused on reusable packaging, and that's kind of the main issue because plastics take thousands of years to degrade, if ever, food waste is maybe more immediate concern, but definitely part of the conversation. So, you know, Sandra, how are you thinking about this? And then Paige, I know you have some separate ideas.
Yeah, 1000%. I love this question, and we cannot ignore food waste in our effort to reduce single-use packaging. The impact of food waste is larger on a carbon emissions basis than that of packaging, so it has to be part of the entire restaurant sustainability transformation. The way we are looking at it is we're trying to tackle food waste in a number of ways. We have, at the end of the day, as a fresh, healthy operator, we have inedible food waste, so avocado pits that you cannot eat, and we have edible surplus food that we have not sold at the end of the day. Hopefully that is a small amount every day, and generally it is, but it's still there. So the options are to compost it, to trash it, we don't want to do that, to compost it, or to sell it. And so we are composting at some stores, but what we're doing at most stores in New York City is selling the surplus every day through an app called Too Good To Go. The food is sold at a very steep discount, and the customer does not have an option of what to choose on Too Good To Go. It's a surprise. They know that coming to the store, and they get surplus edible food that, because of health code, we would have to throw away at the end of the day. We're not allowed to keep it overnight. So that's like brown rice, hot brown rice, or warm chicken, that kind of thing. So we are now in the process of measuring the impact of that partnership with Too Good To Go on our food waste levels, and it's looking promising, but it does require, at our scale, a lot of training of our staff in a way that a mom and pop wouldn't have to worry about. We don't want to sell things that say almonds or pumpkin seeds that are totally fine to have to serve the next day. We would take a big margin hit on that. So we do have to train to only sell the surplus. So composting, selling surplus, and are two of our big initiatives. Obviously, we also train on cooking in small batches, as small as possible. to really minimize surplus food. But I am definitely always looking for more tech-enabled solutions to food waste, and it's a never-ending, at this point, it's a never-ending effort and something that takes a lot of our mind space.
Yeah, and Paige, I know you've done some work on-site disposal systems for food, particularly at marketplaces and some other larger venues. Would love to hear your experience on what other options are available.
Yeah, so I've specifically worked with anaerobic digesters, so organic waste digesters. So those are commercial units. Typically you see with grocery operators, but also, larger, markets or places that are producing, a fair amount of excess organic waste at the end of the day. And, there are pros and cons, I think, to those guys. I think, pros, obviously they reduce fuel emissions from carters, right? Can also help you reduce your waste management costs. However, digesters are costly to install, and require, a very robust plumbing system, very high volume velocity output with those machines. So they're not suitable, I would say, for every operation. Composters, commercial composters are another solution, I think, that could be suitable for smaller operations. You see, I think, a lot of coffee shops with these little composting, units like the size of a trash can, and then, bigger commercial units for those as well. But they do require, pickup of that product, that is being created, and maintenance, and of course they're not for free, right? So I think, it just depends on the operation, but in general, waste management or organic waste management, I think, could be built as a closed loop cycle, just like delivery packaging. It's more involved, right? So we're talking about, either growing your own organics or even fostering, direct trade relationships, and then taking those products and upcycling them, right? So, using the bits in ways that most people throw away. And then, of course, composting those scraps, sending them right back into the system. So I think, you can look at it at a micro level and a macro level, but, every operation is different. But there are options out there for any type of operator, I believe.
So farm to table and then back to the farm again is the new thing. Excellent. Well, one last question here. This is a quick one for Sandra. Does Just Salad have any reusable solutions for sauce cups or disposable sauce cups with the reusable bowls, or are you planning on launching any additional reusable container items in the future?
That's a great question. The priority right now is to enhance our current reusable container system to potentially start using some recycled plastic in the polypropylene container, and to increase the overall sustainability of the reusable container supply chain. And so that's my priority over the next year. I would say, listen, if you want reusable sauce cups, can't do that right now for a number of logistical reasons, but ask for your dressing mixed into your salad and get that, avoid that sauce cup altogether. I will say our sauce cups are not plastic, they are fiber. But again, I champion reuse all the way, so.
Excellent, that's a great point. Well, that's it for our questions today. Appreciate everybody for joining in, and I'll hand it back over to Derek Sherman to send us on our way for the day.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you to Lauren, Sandra, and Paige. Incredibly insightful and uplifting just to hear, what's going on and hear about what's to come. And I would, if Lauren and Scott and Sandra and if Paige, if you're comfortable, please feel free to share your own individual company information on our thread if people want to follow what you're putting out there in newsletters and what have you. Just wanted to thank all of you for putting the energy and time into this. We greatly appreciate it as a group and the audience. And I want to thank the audience for joining and taking the time to join this morning. These webinars and these educational events that we do come with a lot of work and energy and your feedback. So we'll look to continue to do programming. We put a message in the chat that if you want to learn about some upcoming future events, please stay tuned. On the 27th, which is next Tuesday, we have a hospitality industry roundtable meeting that's open to guests, which are operators. We're going to be hearing from Carlos Suarez from Rosemary's, who's going to be sharing his experience. And they just actually recently opened a location on 20th and 1st. So thank you all again for joining. Also want to acknowledge again the Isaac Center and all the work they do. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.